Morning, good afternoon, or good evening. We're gonna go ahead and get this started here in just a couple minutes. Gonna let some folks finish trickling in, and then we'll get started here in just a minute. All right, it looks like the trickle of folks coming in has slowed, so I'll go ahead and kick this off. Thank you for everybody for coming today. This is the Decisions Daily Lunch and Learn here on the 31st of July. My name is Tim Stahl, and I'm the Senior Director of Solutions Architecture here at Decisions. Been with the company for quite a while. In fact, I see some familiar names on here, so hello to those that I've met in person before in some cases. You'll see we have the rest of the schedule here for who will be joining and running these throughout the week. Of course, we have Vice Pedersen Will, who will be on tomorrow. We've got Jared, who's fantastic, old J-Rod from the training team. And of course, one of my friends, Akshay, will be here to round out the week. So just in case you missed it, we'd like to go ahead and kick these off at the top of the program here. But there are versions of Decisions that have reached end of life support. The date's been set up for all versions up to and including version 6. Of course, you can read the screen here, but the main things to note, to be aware of, really at this point are that last date down here, that June 1, 2023, which was total cessation of end of life support, including critical services on that. Really, we're trying to get folks up to version 8. Of course, you can go out to releases.decisions.com to download that. You could also reach out to us if you have any questions about that, and we'll be more than happy to walk you through that, talk through any of the newest features that are on there, security updates, bug fixes, etc. Another thing not to miss out on, our bi-weekly product roadmap session is coming up on August 10th. So every other Thursday, the Decisions product team will be sharing the future of the intelligent automation platform. So we'll explore how the platform's improved over the last 6 months and give you a glimpse into the features in store for the upcoming 18. We always appreciate your feedback. We want you, the users of our product, to help us drive the new features that we have here, because who better to tell us what this needs than the folks that are using it? So feel free to join us every other Thursday from 11 a.m. to noon Eastern to learn and contribute to the future of Decisions. There is a link here. Obviously, it's going to be hard for you to click, but if you go to decisions.com/events, you'll be able to find this product roadmap bi-weekly there that you can sign up for. So that being said, let me go ahead and pop out of the presentation here. I know we had a couple questions today that were sent in ahead of time. So I'll go ahead and we can start with those and go from there. And I see there, yeah, one thing to note too is always feel free while we're here. You've got the chat feature, you have the Q&A feature. Please feel free to use those to submit your questions as we're going through, and I will get to them as we traverse through the program today. So yes, so the questions, first couple that were submitted, we had one from that was, I created a case entity within the wrong namespace, included it in my flows, and created trigger flows in its configuration folder. But can I now change that namespace, or must I recreate the data type with all its contents? Well, I do hate to be the bearer of bad news on the first question, but unfortunately, once that data type has been created, you're not able to actually change the namespace. It's tied to quite a few things on the back end, including the actual table name that it creates in the database. So unfortunately, the only way to change the namespace is to recreate that data type. You can copy it by simply doing a right-click, edit, copy, give it a new name with the namespace in front of it, and that will that should create that new one for you in the correct namespace. Let's see here. I've got another one that came in that said, how can you write and implement a rule that will check to see if an input has a certain amount of characters / digits? So there's a couple ways to do this, and I'm going to dive into one that I typically use for this. So what we'll do, let's start by creating our rule. So we're going to create a statement rule here. Test for X characters. I'll go ahead and click on create. And we've got our normal statement rule here, everything everybody's used to seeing. I'm going to go ahead and give it an input string here so we have something to test against. I'm clicking to set up input data. And let's see, we'll say test string. Oops, if I can type. Go ahead and save that. And then we'll set up our rule. So we'll say if the test string. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can test for things in here. Of course, a lot of you are probably familiar with the, is or is not, the character rules that are in here, the length rules, etc. And these are really garnered around, how long the string is more than, what's in it. Same with the list, right? But what we can do is for this, we can use a regex max or a match, excuse me, hard to say that fast, but a regex match. And it's a very simple regex you can use to test for characters. And I'll show you not only how to set it up in decisions, but a tool that I use to build these because they are not intuitive. Anyone who's used regex before will know it's not intuitive to set these up. But in this case, this is a very, very straightforward one that is pretty straightforward to match. So what we'll do is we'll go to regex max and we'll hit next. And now we need to know the pattern. So what is it looking for? Now, again, this is a standard out there. So this is a library you can use. It's in most programming languages at this point, if not all of them. But what this does is gives you a programmatic way to tell the system what to look for. Now, again, I mentioned it's not intuitive. You have to know the syntax of how to build these. But what you can do is there's sites out there like this one, this regexer here. If we go over here, it's just regexer.com. In fact, I'll put it in the chat so you can copy paste it later if you need to. We go to everyone. But you can use this. It's a free utility out there. And it tells you how to build these expressions. So it gives you some text you can test against here in the middle. Of course, you can change this to your own if you'd like, but we'll use this because it'll work for our purposes. And it has all of the reference guides here on how to build these things up. There's even cheat sheets you can use that give you kind of a quick and dirty way to find things. But in this case, I know what we're looking for would be in our reference here, and we'll look for, I think it's this one. Yeah, so quantifier is what we're actually looking for here. And what this will do is basically we tell regex what to go look for. So if we wanted to look for, if we wanted to match a pattern that said, anytime, I want to see if this string here has anything in it that has two L's, one right after the other. Well, what we can do is we can put an L there, and immediately you'll see it's matching on L's. So we got L's all over the place. And then in curly braces, we can say, well, how many L's do there have to be? And I can put 2 in there. And now what this is going to do is match anytime I have 2 L's, it's going to return true. It's going to actually find that data. And if we use this within decisions over here, the statement rule will evaluate true. So we'll just copy and paste that in there. That's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about some of this other stuff that's in there. It's just this middle part here. But you'll copy and paste that pattern in there. We'll hit done. And now if we go to our debugger and we do a test string of test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, thing 1, something like that, and we hit start, we're going to see it doesn't match, right? Because we don't have anything in here that have 2 L's in a row. But if I do it again and I say rolling afterwards and we hit it, we'll see that it does match because, of course, it found those 2 L's. So again, it'll do this with numbers. It'll do this with strings. It'll do this with parts of strings. There's a lot to it, but if you're doing something that straightforward where you're looking for just a certain number of characters within the string, that's a really easy, fast way to do it. In fact, you can see the execution time on this is really, really low. So it's a real quick kind of test you can do. Let's see. Yes, actually, we had a comment come in that says, I find ChatGPT very good in generating regex patterns after I described it what I need. That is an absolute great place to start. You can go in here and kind of fiddle around with this and eventually get it to work. But yes, anything that helps you get these built, and ChatGPT is very good at it right now. So you could say, given this text, I need a regex pattern that returns the word JavaScript out of 3 words that you can get as complex as you want. It'll return the pattern for you, which is great. Yeah, good call there. Let's see, we had another one come in here. I am creating a new instance of a case entity in a trigger flow of that case. How can I dynamically create the human readable case ID for the new instance? Oh, okay. Take a quick sip of soda there. So you're saying I've got a trigger flow to trigger generation of the new case in the same case type that I've got the flow in. Okay. Well, let's see here. Let's test this out. Save that. We'll create a new data type. Where's my case entity? Calls test case 1, thing 1, name. Okay, we have our our different things here that we're going to store in our case, right? So we'll go ahead and I'm just setting up a basic case with just some data elements in it that we can use throughout our case here. The case ID, we'll put TC1. The prefix length is 6, so that'll set up our default case ID information here. I'll leave it in the lunch and learn space. Yeah, all this looks good, and we'll just hit save and let it build that out. And we'll let mine complain. I've got a lot of junk on my instance that will probably complain when it goes through this compile, but we'll get there. Okay, so started, completed. Let's add another state here. State 2. I'm really let's see, actually we'll change you we'll change you to completed. Okay, so everything's ready to go. Let's do a new trigger on here and create new case. Let's see. Oh, that's not going to work because I create the thing first. Great. There we go. Only valid in, I think I have it called state 2. Let's go and save that. Make sure it's set up in the right areas here. Yeah, this is not in the right spot. Oh, 1 second here. Of course, this is the the one thing that I do very infrequently is set these up. So give me 1 second here. Interesting. So when you're building this trigger flow out, if you've got the ability to create your case within here, we'll look at test case 1 as an example. We have our extension data and our folder name and folder description. I guess my question here would be dynamically create the human readable ID for the case. So, my question would be is it should be as straightforward as the folder name. So being able to create that before you pass it in on that flow, passing in the correct parent folder ID for this to go into, I guess, to me, that should be, it should just be as simple as that, as passing that name in and allowing it to create that new case for you. I would say if you do run into any further issues on that one, reach out to support, just support@decisions.com, and ask them that question. They should be able to walk you through that. But I believe it should be as simple as simply setting this folder name here to what you'd like that case to be named. Cool. All right. I'll give just a minute here while I'm kind of exiting out of some of this stuff and see if there was any, if any other questions were, or if anybody had any other questions to ask while I'm. Okay, so I got another one about the, I've opened up a can of worms with my regex one here. So I had another one. So if I want to see if a string had, say, 6 integers, what would that look like? Let's do character classes. We need to look for digit. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's going to be, I think that's it. So it's going to look for any digit. Yeah, there we go. So now it's going to, so this would in this case return, so \d with a 6 in the quantifier says find me 6 digits in a row. If they had to be specific 6 digits, I think you'd put an actual number in there, or maybe it would just be like the number 5 in this example, and then it would look for 6 number 5s as an example there. And as was mentioned earlier, ChatGPT is very good at least giving you a head start kind of idea on what to look for there. And again, once you kind of use this a couple times, it becomes more evident what to do. But the first couple times, this probably isn't going to make a whole lot of sense. But again, doing simple ones like that to start with will really help you kind of get a better understanding of what regex is looking for. Okay, absolutely. Yeah, no problem at all. So, one of the other questions that, or one of the questions that come in is, how do you do kind of some logic maybe that you're trying to build in the statement rule designer that doesn't really fit any of the verbs we have. And one of them, some things that come up from time to time are like, how do I find out if a zip code, as an example, we use postal codes here, is in a list of certain postal codes, right? And there's not really a good way to do that. We could say, is it in, we could say, does string contain any in the list? Is string in the list? You can put a list of values there. One of the things that would happen though is if you're given a list of string and you want to see if a string is in that list of string, for an example, it's not exactly straightforward to do this. And one of the things you could use in that case would be a rule extension. So I think one of the things I could take a couple minutes and go through here, because it's not something that's used all that often within the platform. So it might be something that's interesting to kind of check through. But if I looked at, for an example, if I'm given our inputs here are a list of string, right? So it's got a list of test strings that we're passing in. And I want to see if that list contains a certain, list contains a certain amount of things. What you'll notice is the comparator here is saying, does this list contain this string? I don't have a way to say, does it contain anything in another list of strings? So kind of like comparing a list to a list as an example. So what we could do in this case is build a quick rule extension that could do that work for us, and then we could come back in here and use it. And what a rule extension does in this case is it creates a custom verb. So you can see we have verbs like exists, is not empty, does not contain any, et cetera, et cetera. We have one here called rule extension 1 because I'm really creative when I built one the other day and gave it a really good name that means absolutely nothing to anybody. But what these are is either a statement rule or a flow that looks like a verb here. And all this will become apparent here in just a second. So I'm going to create another tab here. And let's create us. What we want to do is we want to be able to take a list of strings and see, do they contain something in this other list of strings over here? So to do that, we're going to go in and create a rule. We're going to create a rule extensions down here on the bottom. And I'm going to use a flow, so sequential rule extension. Because what this does, and you'll see when I load it up here, it gives you the entire power of the flow engine to be able to do whatever you want. So you can call APIs, you can do all sorts of stuff. You can do anything you can do in a flow, you can do within this to check your logic and return a true or false like a statement rule does. So they're really good when you have maybe business users in that you want to kind of obfuscate some of the logic, and you just want them to be able to create something simple, like in this case, is string in list of strings, as an example. We'll give it that name, and then the name in this case matters, and I'll show you why, because that's what it's gonna look like here in the middle. So when we set up our rule extension, what we need to do is we need to tell the system, hey, this rule extension is only valid based on certain data that you're passing in. So what we need to do is we need to match this input data. The first one we're going to pass in needs to match what this given data is here. So whatever this first one is, which in this case, you can see it's a list of string. So we need to have at least one input here that's a list of string, because it's automatically going to match that. So we'll say input string list. We'll say that. Hit save. And then what we could do then is say, okay, we could start building our logic up. And I could go down here and I could say, okay, given that, we can pull out a, is string in list step out here. Expand that out. And where is it here? Down at the bottom here. And string in list. I think actually I need one more thing before I do that. Let's see here. 1 second here. Okay. Yeah, so what we'll do, so we'll come down here, let's get our string and list. Our list could be, actually I've got it backwards here. Again, it's something I don't do that often, but it is something that's interesting to show. So what I need to do here is we have to set up a little bit of conditional logic. So I need to say for each string here, see if it exists in a list that I'm going to have here. So I'm going to say, okay, given this input list string, go ahead and add our collection here. We'll grab that item and item index. We're going to say, okay, for each one of these strings, check if it's in this list that I have here, right? So we're going to say constant insensitive. My list, I'm going to go ahead and just build it here. And I'm going to say, I'll stick with my zip code thing, my postal code. So I'm just going to add in a couple postal codes here. There we go. There's just a couple. And the value is going to be my item. Okay, for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and end it like this. Let's go and debug it, make sure what we're doing makes sense. Hit start. And it looks like one of these actually approved and said that it was true, because it's saying, okay, the value I passed in is in the list. Cool, we're good to go. All right. So what we do at this point is we need to tell the flow what to do. So when you create a rule extension, you'll see there's automatically output data here by default, right? There's a result that's Boolean because this has to approve true or false. And that's all this can return to our rule designer, our statement rule engine. So what we do is we'll say, okay, if the string is in the list, even if it's just the first one, that matches what we need to do. So let's output that Boolean true to the end step and call it a day. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this was, we'll say create true. And I'm just going to call it my output. The name doesn't matter, but you'll see they do have to match here in a second. So we'll say the output is true. We'll save it. And we'll map that to the end step here. And I'm also going to pick from the flow here my create true output, right? So now what I'll do is I'm going to say if this is false, so if it's not in the list, let's go to the next one in the list and see if it is. And we're going to traverse through all of those. And if we don't find one that's true, then the string wasn't in the list, and we have to call this false. That's going to break when I do. But basically, you'll see here, if we go in and debug it, and I put, here, I'm just going to put a bunch of stuff in here that I know isn't going to match. And we'll go ahead and hit start. We'll see that it ran through that entire list. Not a single one of them was in the list. So it ended up out here in my end step as a false, right? Result false. But if I ran this again and one of them had one of those numbers in it, you'll see, boom, okay, even though the first 6 didn't, the 7th one did, so it evaluated true. So I've got my logic set up now, right? I don't have my steps named very well. I would not pass a quality control check here. But basically, we went through every one of those strings we passed in. We saw if it was in the list. If one of them is, then the rule is true, therefore true. Otherwise, it's false. So now we can save this. And we have a rule extension. So if I come back over here, and let's see if it'll get it. Yep. We can now see I have a custom verb here called is string in list of strings. I can select that. We can see there's no parameters on it because I didn't, there's nothing else to select. It's literally just passing in this, and it's going to evaluate against the strings I have in there. We could hit debug now, and I could put in just some data that I know isn't going to work. We could hit start debugging, and we can see false. Nope, it wasn't in that list, so it didn't work. But if I come in here in the middle and put one in that I know is in there, boom, I got a true path. Now, again, this might be good for if you're trying to evaluate some addresses that you have coming in, and you have a list of addresses and you want to take all of those zip codes and you want to say, does at least one of them fall within this other list of zip codes? You know, that's an easy way to abstract that and do that and give it to a user in a way that's very simple for them to stand up. Has some complex logic to it, but it obfuscates it from them. They don't have to worry about that part. They can just select the verb from the list. You can also go one step further where I can add a list here to use in the evaluation. So that way I can even set up that list within the rule as well. So if we wanted to come back here and say, okay, let's take this one step further. We have our input string list. Well, let's do our zip code list now too. That'll be also a list of strings. And what we'll do is we'll take our rule, and instead of adding them here, well, let's just select that from the list of strings there. We'll hit save. So now if I go back to my rule, and I'm gonna exit out of this and go back in it to make sure it gets that update. So we can see is test string, is string in list of strings. Well, if we go in here now, you'll notice I have an input list, that zip code list. So now it's not static. It's not within the rule. I can actually, say, I can actually put in the things I want it to work against, and it'll have those comparators right here within the rule. So now if I debug it and I put some random stuff in there and we hit start, we'll see, well, it's not in the list, and the list is right here. So I can see what it is now, which is great. And again, if I come in here and do the 5s, well, now it worked against it. And you can see that was all done now within the rule designer without having to expose the flow designer possibly to, to your end users. They can just kind of select it from there and go from there. So anyway, rule extensions, again, not something that are used all the time, but they can be pretty powerful depending on, your particular use case. And again, if you have some complex logic that you want to go through, but you don't want to expose all that to the end user, you want them to just be able to select it from a list and, kind of give the options that you need. This is a very powerful way to do that. So again, I'll take a quick pause. We're about half hour in, see if there are any questions that came out of that, or if there are any other questions that anybody had, I'd be more than happy to answer. All right. Well, I will say based on that, that's kind of what I had today. Those are the questions we had today. If there is nothing else, we did the learn part. Now we can give you guys the 30 minutes back to go do the lunch part. All right. Well, again, if anything ever comes up, feel free to join these. We have them, daily at, Monday through Thursday at noon Eastern. But you can always also reach out to us at any time at support@decisions.com, and we're more than happy to help. With that, everybody have a great rest of your day.